What's going on, guys? Vulkan here, and today we have a brand new blog from the developers called 1 Million Rising. Now, this is obviously a call out to the fact that they sold 1 million copies of V Rising in their first week, which is just insane to think about. I mean, the game's fantastic. It has a lot of stuff that a lot of people really enjoy, right? And kind of blends it together into this unique vampire setting. And the game is so polished for an early access game. I'm going to have a full review coming up soon now that I've completed everything and I've really kind of experienced the full game. But let's just say, spoiler, it's very positive. So this blog post claims to have some news about what's coming next, you know, what they're currently working on, what they're kind of thinking about in terms of what they want to do next. So I haven't read this one yet, so we're going to experience this together. Hopefully there's some new surprises in here, but let's go ahead and get this thing started. So right off the top, it looks like today we're looking up the night sky in the land of Vardaron. There are no clouds, no stars, no moonlight. There's only the flapping of over 1 million pairs of midnight black wings filling the sky. What a great intro. So let's see. We announced that 1 million players had bought V Rising. At that time, we were already completely floored by seeing more than 150,000 vampires on at the same time in our game. I mean, like I said, it's an awesome game. Thanks to 1 million. This is just the beginning. Okay, the first week and next step. So this is what we're looking for here, because right now I'm very curious to see where they want to take this game. We know that there's going to be a new area south of Cursed Forest, and we know that there is that kind of like Dunley Arena thing that's in the center of the Dunley farmland. So what truly comes next? So the release of V Rising has been met with overwhelming support. I would say so. Let's see. Many journeys have a set path and a road to a clear destination. While we certainly have our goal in mind for V Rising, our path is not all set. They're oiling the axles, making sure the horses are well fed, and making sure that everything is in order before we cast ourselves into the wild. All right, so here we go. Our primary focus right now is bug fixes, balance changes, server optimization, and quality of life improvements. Okay, so yes, I think this is probably the best way to go about doing it. So if we take a look back, and I'm going to take you back a few years to Wolcen. So Wolcen was a game that had a fantastic foundation for an action RPG. It had the visuals, it had the graphic or the combat feel, it had the animations, it had the smoothness of gameplay. It had a lot of things that were done very, very well. But unfortunately, the game was riddled with bugs. There were issues with nodes in the skill trees either not working, or the math wasn't added correctly or input correctly. There were weapons that weren't working. There were effects that weren't working. It was just everything had an issue. Everywhere you looked, there was a problem. So outside of the eye candy, it really just, it struggled. And instead of going and making sure everything was fixed and ready to go, they continued to add content on top to then try to kind of help satiate all the players. But the problem was, when you add things on top of a weak foundation, the house crumbles. So you need to make sure that the foundation is strong, it's fixed, there's no cracks in the concrete, there's no weak studs, anything like that, before you build your second story onto your house, right? So having them go in and make these bug fixes, do these balance changes, which we'll talk about here in a moment, this is going to help set up the game for a very strong future. So in terms of balance changes, this is something that I'm really excited for, because right now I can name you all of the skills that are like solid and ones that you want to stick with for a very long time in V Rising, because they're just so much better than some of the other skills. Whether that's in terms of damage, utility, flexibility, being able to cast on the move, being able to cheese bosses. In terms of weapons being way more useful than other ones, weapons being either super weak or just not good for a certain type. So for instance, like if you're somebody who doesn't really care too much about like stealth or PvP, you're probably not going to use slashers, just because, I mean, why would you use those when you have the scythe? So these are type of things that I think there needs to be pros and cons and strengths and weaknesses to all of the different skills, but not to the extent that we're seeing some of these, where you simply never see them equipped because they're truly just not as good and there's a much better option. So anyway, that's where I think they need to focus, and I think they're on that, which is great. Server optimization, I'm on a private server. I haven't had any issues, but I have heard of other people out there having problems. And then quality of life improvements. I have a very long laundry list of things that they need to add to the game to make things much more smooth for people. For instance, a party system, an LFG queue if you want one of those instead. A map overlay would be fantastic. Loot filter would be great. Auto pickup of some things would be fantastic. So there's just a lot of stuff that I think could go into this game. And granted, it's early access. They're going to be working on some of those. But again, I think having the focus on this, their heads on their shoulders correctly. Now, the next step will be to analyze all of the data and the feedback from the first weeks of early access to make sure we can nail the master plan moving forward. We're already working on new material to inject more life into Valorduran. So I'm curious if this is going to be some of those things that people put out there, like more random events, more things to kind of help. See, I think the world feels pretty alive already. But granted, it is scripted. You know where Vincent the Frostbringer is going to walk. You know where Jade is. You know where, certain things spawn. Like all of those things, right? There's a little bit of randomness to it, but randomness in a confined area. Now, I think having like random events would be really cool. I know we talked about this in an earlier video. Like, I really liked the concept of Rift, the MMO. Now, I know some people didn't like the rifts, but I really enjoyed them. It was so cool to see, you're in like a zone and all of a sudden, you see this big like message and all these greater rifts start opening up and all these monsters start pouring out of them. And, you just kind of like gather together whoever is there, hey, I'm going to the fire rift down south. Let's go down there and let's check it out. And you just kind of party up with people naturally on the way there. And then you're in a group and you're taking on bosses and you're trying to work through the different stages of a rift, and ultimately you kill the boss and you get some great loot. And it was just such a cool thing when it first came out. And I think if they take that, put a spin on it, they're obviously very creative, and make something a little bit more maybe engaging or vampire focused, I think it'd be really cool. So who knows? Could be something with the angels. Just throwing it out there. But anyway, but improving on the game is more than just adding more content on top of what we already have. We'll have to improve the entire journey to make sure V Rising will reach its full potential. For those of you who missed out on the interview with our marketing director, Johan Ives, I think it's Ives, sorry if I mispronounced that, in our previous dev blog, here are some what he communicated regarding game updates during early access. So in early access, our mission will be to find out what's the most important to our players and how to take the V Rising to the next level. We currently plan to work on more extensive updates rather than run frequent smaller patches and minor changes. It's too early to tell when the first bigger V Rising content patch will arrive, as we will give it the time to make sure it brings something new to the experience. This will require more patience from you as a fan, which I think is fine. We're to the point now in the gaming industry where we're okay waiting. We're okay being patient as gamers, because we have just been let down time after time after time with devs feeling the pressure from the vocal minority of, we need more content, we need more stuff to do, we need this, we need this. And because of that, things get rushed through the pipeline and it ends up being, a piece of garbage. And then it ends up bringing the demise of the game as a whole. So I think being patient is something that a lot more people are okay with, because they typically know that being patient, allowing more time for the devs, they're going to come out with a better end product, which will then make us happier and keep us playing for a longer period of time. Now, obviously, the flip side of that is if we are patient and we wait and then it comes out and it's still just terrible, then there's going to be hell to pay. But, we have to kind of take that chance. Anyway, meanwhile, we'll do our best to make sure the first content update will be worth waiting for, just like we said. So the massive support V Rising received will not only give us the opportunity to finalize our plans for the game, but it'll also give us enough time to include some of your darkest dreams of what the experience can look like at the full release, the 1.0 release. So we can promise you something very special for 1.0 with time. There's going to be more weapons to wield, which this was a big caveat, or not caveat, a big point of criticism for me. So really going into it, I had the kind of expectation that there was going to be more weapons that would drop, right? There was gonna be more weapons that would just show up. Now we kind of got a little bit of that with the general, like the Reaper, the Undead General's Reaper, whatever it was called, that drops from the Undead Commanders. We kind of got a little bit of an experience with that, but I was really expecting a lot more variety. Now, I know I talked about that in my first impressions, and it wasn't exactly accurate because but at that time I hadn't gotten to iron yet, and when I wasn't an iron, I didn't have access to some of the other weapons, and because of that, there were issues, right? I was like, oh my gosh, there's only a couple weapons. What is going on? Now that I got into iron, and you know, I've obviously finished the game, but unlocking like the scythe and the slashers, that was a much needed addition to the toolkit that was out there. Now, I would like some more, you know, I'm always down for it. Like a Castlevania whip would be really cool. But those type of things, I think, you know, they can continue to add and easily add. So anyway, more weapons, I think, is always great. More loot to plunder, which curious to see what that is, and more sorcery to conjure, which more skills. The skills I think they have out there are fantastic in terms of creativity, the way they function and all that. But just going back to the balance passes, they're kind of out of balance right now. But what they have, I think, is really good, and they continue to build on that. I think it'll be just fine. More V-Bloods with new challenges, lands to explore, and further ways to enhance your castle to express your vampiric glory. So V-Bloods. I love the way that they kind of designed the ramp and the difficulty curve with V-Bloods. Starting with the Alpha Wolf, which was like basically no mechanics. I mean, they summoned a couple wolves, but that was it. All the way up to Solaris the Immaculate, who was a fantastic fight. Absolutely just loved the design of that fight. It was so cool. If you haven't got to experience it yet, I'm not going to go into it, but just know it's really great. You're going to enjoy it. But I'm curious to see, will that kind of difficulty curve reset, and maybe what comes after Solaris will be something more akin to like a Bandit King, or maybe like a Jade or a Christina, in terms of not difficulty, but just like mechanics and stuff like that. And then it'll ramp up again to a point that's, you know, let's say 4 or 5 notches higher than Solaris in terms of difficulty, damage, and mechanics. So will they kind of reset that ramp, or will it just be like the next one after Solaris is going to be even crazier? I can't see them really doing that, because I just feel like you're going to have some form of exhaustion that comes out of that, but who knows? More lands to explore. I have a video on this where we tour kind of the locked off areas right now. There's nothing out there, but you can kind of get the feel for where they're going. So the first one's definitely going to be a snowy region, which it looks like we're going to get like a little teaser here. And then further ways to enhance your castle, obviously housing. People love that. A world that will feel fresh to dive in and sink your teeth into again and again. The vampire's journey is far from over. And I think that this is going to call a little bit out to some of the new deities that we saw towards the end of the game after the Solaris fight. So there's some really cool stuff that I think they're going to play into, and I'm excited for it. So let's take a look at this picture we got. Okay, so our concept artists are already sketching possible future scenarios in V Rising. Okay, so this looks great. This looks like the area south of Cursed Forest, the one that got into. You have these kind of lava pyres here, or spires rather. So you kind of have these lava spires. This looks very Dark Souls-ish, to be honest with you. So you have your vampire, got a little spear action. And then you got this big dude that's just like wandering around. And I'm curious if he's going to be like another V-Blood we're going to have to take down, or maybe he'll be an NPC and he'll be friendly and we can exchange for, maybe he's a wandering merchant, who knows. But this does really resemble that area that they're working on right now. So it looks like we're at the end here. So right now we're taking one step back to be able to leap forward. We're regrouping so we can move into the next leg of our journey with unshakable intent. These dev updates might not come as frequently as first, as we'll be taking a moment to refill our blood reserves. After that, we'll be launching onward at full speed to bring you new dark designs for the fall and beyond. Okay, so fall's not capitalized, and typically folks that are outside the United States call fall autumn. So I don't necessarily think this is a, hey, we're not going to see anything until the fall, but maybe 1.0 is in autumn. Either way, who knows? But for now, we'll just aim for maybe September, October time period, which would give us, you know, 4-5 months until we see 1.0, which would be fine. Either way, I bet the marketing team is going to continue to report on our progress from inside the thick walls of the Stunlock dungeon. So this is a really good update. I think this provides us with a lot of insight as to what they're working on. I'm glad they're focusing on bug fixes and kind of fixing the game as it stands right now before diving in and trying just to stack stuff on top of it. But this concept art really kind of clarifies and solidifies the notion that hey, you know, the next zone that we're going to be getting is the one that's already in the game. We've already seen some of these snowy regions. They're just going to work on kind of filling it in with a whole bunch of really cool encounters. And again, if we look at the different zones, there's what, like 6 to 8, I think, V-Bloods per zone, maybe up to 10. So I wonder if we're gonna be looking at another like 10 V-Bloods that's gonna come with this region here. I'm not entirely sure, but there's a lot to chew on here. But I want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think of this update? What do you think is coming next? And also, I'm gonna go back up here really quick because where is that thing at? Where is it at? We're talking about, right? Quality of life. I want to hear some quality of life improvements that you guys want to see in the game. I have my list, but I'm very curious to see what you all have ran into that you think would be just fantastic to add in to V Rising. Thank you all so much for all the support. It's been phenomenal. I really appreciate you guys. And as always, this has been Vulkan, and I will talk to you next time.
Sound off one and all, everybody. Don't take what you openly handed. Reach up and grab the world by the hand and watch what comes along.